3D abstract art, which is very different. And she has a passion for doing these things. And she's done this since she was a young child. And she's got this new work technique, and she uses scraps, and you'll see, she's going to do a demonstration later, where we'll see exactly how she does it. She creates both art pieces and functional items, and she enjoys making her own paper, as well as discovering new handmade papers. And she'll be doing a demonstration for us of thread painting technique, and which I'm very excited to see. And she will have several pieces. She has several pieces here. She actually has gotten her degree. She got her undergraduate degree in art and design from MIT, and she got a Master of Architecture degree from UC Berkeley. So knowing that she's very, very talented, and we're very excited about her. I think we have someone that needs to make an announcement. Ralph, our treasurer.
Well, yes, and thank you, and thanks and welcome to all of you who are returning, and for those of you who are here for the first time. We'd like to have you be aware that we have applications for membership to this organization, which entitles you to discounts from local art supply stores, and not to mention being in the company of others such as yourselves. So see me at any time. Be happy to give you an application form and welcome you to the organization.
Thanks, Mike. Yes. So anyway, well, we're going to introduce here Jessica Sandler. She's going to give a presentation, and then we're going to take a break. We're going to set up, and then she's going to set her actual demonstration. So we'll have a little break then. You can have your questions during the break. Okay, thanks, Jessica.
So, as Diane mentioned, my art, I'm sort of I'd like to say Renaissance woman rather than jack of all trades, because it sounds nicer. But I dabble in all media. But lately, for the past probably 5 years, I've been focusing mostly on this mix of fibers and incorporating other elements into it. And so you can see some of these pieces here. That piece, the blue one, actually was part of an exhibit. I'm a member of Arts Worcester, and I received a Material Needs Grant, where they award a grant to a cohort of about 10 to 12 artists to play with the materials. And that, I actually started introducing more metals into the copper elements. I was able to purchase, soldering and metalworking tools. So that was a nice addition to that. And so you can see there's also metal elements in this. This is actually a close-up of the other piece that's over there. So I encourage you during the intermission or afterwards even to wander over and look at this close-up, because definitely there's a difference when you look at it that's close. When you look from a distance, a lot of people assume they know what it is, and they walk up and realize it's not actually what it seems. So I have a slideshow of some items.
Trying to stay out of the way.
Yeah, you want the light?
So this is another piece that's not here from the same grant program that I had. And so the piece on the right is the full piece, and on the left is a small detail shot of the top left corner. And as you can see, a lot of my work, this piece, the entire background, that square, the brownish square, is, when you look at it really closely, it's an amalgam of all sorts of little bits and scraps of fibers that are put together. And my approach is painterly, so I look at it as if I'm painting with the fibers and the colors. So I'll be stitching for a while and realize I need more color, or I need something different in the spot. spot, and then I'll just go down to a piece of fabric or a few pieces of thread, whatever I have on hand in that particular color, and keep working. So it is a similar process to sort of painting or collaging, just using fibers and thread. And this is another piece. This is quite large. One on the right is a full piece. It's 36 wide by 48 high, so it's quite large. And on the left again, you can see a detail. And this one, each of those circles was made separately and then mounted on a larger piece of linen. And all those squiggles are brass rods and tubing. For the brass, I use E6000 in a well-ventilated area. The fibers are actually stitched down, hand stitched. It takes a while. So, sometimes I will use a little bit of glue. I also found that a very good adhesive to use is Gorilla Glue. They're clear adhesive. And so a combination of the two. But I try not to glue if possible. It's just sometimes things get so large that they have some. A lot of times by the time I'm done stitching the middle elements down, because those ends run under, but they don't go all the way through, I've done enough stitching that the piece is held down pretty well. And then if I find a piece of flopping, then I'll go and tap it down. You can see on the detail here that I try to connect those middle pieces through the piece of stitching. And so, actually it was a reverse process. I did the stitching, I kind of found veins that sort of appeared to me, so I highlighted those with little stitching. And then when I made the entire composition, I connected them all with the brass rods. These two pieces are the ones here on display, so I just want to show you how they look differently when they're presented flat, two-dimensional versus in person. So I encourage you to take a look. And I do also, on these, I also have that idea because I do work on the background as well. The one on the left on the launch, the background is a spray-painted background on the canvas. And then on the right, that background, it looks a little bit almost like a plaster wall effect. It's actually polypropylene fabric. And that's something else I work a lot with is fabric that reacts to heat. And so that's that piece there. And then these pieces, this red piece right here is actually this piece right here. And if you look at it in the light, you can see that it's got a lot of holes and gaps in it. And it looks different depending on where you put it. And I still haven't, it's sort of a work in progress, I haven't quite finished it yet, so I'm not sure how this will end up in the end. But so far, a lot of times I'll have pieces kind of all over the place and they hang on my design wall. Sometimes the palette's wrong for what I'm working at the time, or it's just not going the way I thought it was. This one actually, if you look, you can see the bumps because the stitching is wider apart. And I'm trying to decide still if I like that or not.
Hand stitching with machine stitching?
Primarily it's machine stitching, just because of time. But there might be times where I'll do something that I'll manipulate by hand and then keep going. And there are times when I just feel like there's something missing, I don't know what it is yet, I don't own it yet, so I'll just wait, and then I'll find something that it'll just work. So what's wrong with that? The piece on the left is actually an inset, a larger piece. But I have some of the elements. Again, I make a lot of the elements in advance, so you can see some of these pieces are very similar to what's up on that smaller piece, so you can see it later as well. And this is actually a mixture of fibers, fabric, and handmade paper. So as long as it will stay under my needle, I'll probably try to put it there. And then these are some sculptural pieces. The blue piece is on the piano, so you can take a look at that closer later. It's a bowl, but it weighs about, I believe, only about 4 ounces. So that's this piece right here. It could be. And so this started off literally as a pile of fabric, probably like that, on my work table. And then it was held down, stitched, embellished. So the dark blue you see is all stitching. So there's no painting or drawing on this at all. It's all done with thread.
Did you have a form that you were wrapping?
No, I actually, if you can look at it really closely, I'll pull it later. There are darts in it. I also make clothing, so I use a lot of pattern making, clothing making, garment sewing techniques. So whatever I can work with to get it to behave the way I want it to. The When people laugh, I'll take that, I'll just crumple it up and then just kind of toss it and set that where it was. That little one is actually, on the left is actually a tiny flower. And I will, these are all out, so I encourage you to take a look at these after the presentation part, but it's just this little flower here. But again, this is all thread. There's no fabric in this at all. And I will be showing the technique and how I made this. Just a quick, there was a video of how I, basically you can see this pile of fibers. That's sort of my palette. That's what I use. Rather than having a palette of paint or some raw materials, you can see there I have sort of this little jig up assembly where I'll just start pulling. You can see there is a color palette there that I'm working with. And I'll be pulling the fibers off of that to mix them up, or sometimes I'll just kind of do them on purpose. Other times I want them more linear. Depending on what I'm doing composition. Because I work in an abstraction, I try not to make things resemble, I try not to force things. So even if it's supposed to be a flower, I'll be thinking of a flower as I'm stitching, but I'm not drawing a flower per se. If I start seeing a flower, I may start writing that out after the fact. The tools I use, there's a couple of needles you can feed on the sewing machine that you'll see. Those gloves that I showed, they have a grip on the tip so that when I'm moving things around, I don't lose track of things and embroider. It's fairly simple what I use. I also have several things that I've made myself out of wood or other things, just kind of jerry them up to keep the fabric. When I work on large pieces, they don't fit into one hoop, so I have to figure out ways to keep everything together until I can get it together. So I'm usually doing them stitch in sections. And then again, this was the technique video. I guess it's not loading. The internet is not loading. So I apologize for that. But you can see on the left that the stitching. It's basically just a lot of moving around. You'll see the demonstration of how I work on it. That shininess that you see is a water-soluble stabilizer that I use that I just put on top of everything to hold everything together and keep it intact. It just dissolves in water. And it has an extra benefit when I dissolve it. If I don't rinse it away completely, it also acts slightly as a stiffener if I want it to be stiffer. So I have that option. This is the more works. You can see how the piece, the gold is added after the fact. I'll use different metallic threads. Sometimes I'll add yarn. I'll put, get it through the needle machine or the bobbin. I'll work with it. There are times I'm putting the piece upside down and back, trying to get both sides, depending on this 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional piece. And then perspective. This seascape, and it's not a typo. It is spelled S-E-E. Is actually a photograph I took of that piece right there, the round and black and gold piece. That actually was just sort of serendipitous accident. I was photographing the piece for the show that it was going to be in, and I had my camera kind of at an angle, kind of lying sideways, and it just sort of kind of looked like a seascape. And so then, that wasn't the first one I took, but then I just started. Once you see it, you kind of have to keep going with it. The video that was going to be, I kind of panned across the whole bottom and kind of found the spot there that I was. And this actually leads into what I do with pieces after they're completed, is I will do digital manipulation. So I take tons of photographs of my work. Because once I sell it, then I no longer have it. But I maintain digital rights to the artwork. So any imagery, that, when I sell the piece, I only sell the piece itself, not the right to use. So on the left is the original photo. It's actually a cropped photo. And then on the right is one of many iterations I did of playing with it, change color, tonality, and I echoed it out to larger formats. And then that, I do have some prints you can take a look at just to see how I use it as prints. I also do handmade books at the holiday times at craft markets, so that's printed on the cover of the little handmade journals that I sell. So it's, I can get a lot of mileage out of one piece. And another variation of that same thing, you can see how going from color to black and white, adding some accents, it changes the piece. And I've had people actually, when I've had the piece, the artwork up at a show, take the piece and try to find that spot. It's kind of like, where's Waldo? Trying to find where the piece photo came from. For me, sometimes it's tough because I forgot that it was upside down and kind of at an angle. And then the final one was cropping. And again, the color, just changing the coloring and the lighting really changes the what you see in the piece. This is sort of that bottom right corner of the photograph. Zoomed in. And again, I like photographing at an angle as well to get, partly because my work is dimensional, so it's hard to show that when you just photograph it flat on the computer. And so I think that's the last slide. So, let's get on. So I was going to show a few of the pieces that I was talking about. So like I said, this is one, and I will, actually this one can be handled, so I can pass this around. This is just a nice one. It's actually got a lot of give to it, and I've done pieces like this for garments as well, as either as a panel on a garment, or sort of as an accent. I've done sort of jumpers and jackets where this becomes kind of half the top, and the other half is still solid, because it gets a little too much when it's all one piece. But it is all fabric. This one is actually, you can see the red is actually tulle netting. This same type of thing that bridal veils are made out of. There's 2 layers of that, and in between is I sandwich just scraps of fabric though. I believe, if I can remember where some of this fabric came from, I believe some of it came from my daughter's Halloween costume a decade ago. And other bits and pieces over the years. And I tend to, when I save my scraps, next to my sewing machine, I was telling Diane, I have a big bin. And so anything, even the threads that I cut off, little bits of threads when you're sewing that you start and stop, I throw it all into the bin. And then I kind of go through there and then pull out a palette of colors. And if I'm working on a large garment, I'll have a decent amount, so it becomes its own palette. But other times, it's sort of serendipitous. I'll have, purple next to orange, but it just works. And you don't know that until I just kind of look in the bucket. It's like, oh, that's really cool. So I'll grab that section of it, and that becomes something. So, so that one is one of the modes that I work, which is with the tool to sandwich it. It's a little more concrete. It's quicker because I don't have to worry about everything falling out as long as it's stitched enough. This is the opposite end of the spectrum, and this is only thread and nothing else. So if I did not stitch this well enough and properly, this would, it's on a water-soluble stabilizer, which basically looks like plastic wrap that I couldn't move. When I dissolve it, it would completely just fall apart in the ball of string, the ball of thread. So it has to be stitched enough. And this is very similar to traditional lace making in terms of methodology. It's just that I do it very freeform and free. So you'll see as I'm stitching, I'm just basically drawing with the needle as my pen, and the thread is the ink. So it all just comes out. And this one you can see it's got some dimension to it. Because that fabric stiffener, I left most of it in after it was dissolved. And then I just kind of held it over a shape. Actually, I think I put it into a little cup. I will speed things up sometimes using a heat gun. You have to be careful though, because certain fibers, especially when you're working with a tool, will melt. And so you have to know what will behave a certain way. On that piece right there, the black edging is actually a cambric fabric. The basis of it is polypropylene, which melts under heat. It's basically the same stuff that covers under your couch or chairs, the dust barrier. But it actually melts and then kind of curls and does some interesting things when you hit the heat. And a nice property I'll demonstrate later is that if you stitch it down in places before you hit it with the heat gun, it won't melt so much where it's stitched down. So you can actually kind of shape it. So that's the interesting way of doing it. That has this one as well. So, and then these are just a few other samples before the intermission that I'll show around. These are just some small pieces. I'll just link these out here. You can take a look at during intermission. These are just scraps, but these are bits of fabric, more patchwork style on one side. On the back is just one color of fabric. And in between was just a layer of tissue paper. And the whole thing was just stitched and stitched and stitched. These are scraps left over. I actually made a, for Christmas, I was in a swap, a Yankee swap. These were pieces left over from making the hand-bound book, and these were used for cover. And it was a sort of, it was sort of imitating a leather journal where the flap folds over and gets tied on. So these were some of the pieces left over from that.
Is there a front and back?
Not really. That's what I'm still trying to decide. When I finally do something with it, then I'll. And you might see, what usually happens with pieces like that is when I finally decide on what side is sort of the good side of the front, I will probably embellish it more with more metallic fibers or whatever my accent or primary color is. There are times where I have pieces, I'm actually working on pieces right now that are going to twist, so there won't be a front or back. And so, and then these are things that sometimes I'll just play around, and so this is sort of a flower. It's kind of gotten soft over time, but because it's more like a poppy-like flower. And I've made several of these. I use these sometimes. I put them on packages and gifts and things because it's a nice way to do it. I'll wire them. And if you just pinch the back, it does take on that dimensionality, whereas it's just flat. So again, I'll pass it on. Last one, I'll pass it on. And then these I'll leave out as well. These are more samples from that one piece that you can see that I do many, many pieces until I find the ones I like, and then I'll audition all of them until one is appropriate or not. And so, and again, this one is much lacier. You can see it right through it. You can see the light going right through it. Whereas these are more opaque. And the main difference between these two pieces is that this one has handmade paper in the mix. And this one is just fibers and threads. And then again, it depends on how long I stitch it, as opposed to, and then these also, you'll notice to come up close, I kind of stitched a square outline, so I wanted them to be sort of a square shape. Others will be more freeform. So, we'll have an intermission, and then I'll do the demonstration, but at the same time, I'll be showing you a lot of materials that I use, and how it all goes together, and how that all comes together from a pile of what seems like nothing.
Okay, so everybody, if you want to have we have refreshments here, you can take a break. We'll set up for the demo, so you can mingle. Everyone has gotten some refreshments, drinks, whatever, and we'll be having a demonstration by Jessica now.
You want the lights?
She's going to be doing,
Okay.
talking about her stuff.
So I'm going to start by showing you how I put together the materials, and then I'll actually go with the machine and show you some of my stitching process, so you kind of get from beginning to end and get the whole story. So something like this, the pieces, I think everyone's had a chance to see this in person. You can see the pieces of fabric are pretty large on this one. So this is more unique. So the stitching itself is sparser because I don't need to stitch as close together because it's all held together. A lot of pieces I've done later have been smaller scraps of fabric. So something like this. This is already in the hoop. And all this is an embroidery hoop. Any standard embroidery hoop. And what I have is on the back layer, I have something, the water-soluble stabilizer I was talking about. It's just it looks like this. It looks almost like a interfacing or tissue, but it's soft. It's fabric. It's not tissue paper, but it's kind of the same translucency as tissue paper. And this, when you dip it in water, it dissolves completely. Dissolves away. So this is my back layer. You see the white. So what I'll usually do is I'll have a layer of the stabilizer, and I'll actually make another sandwich with this. So I have two layers, and the other layer is, this is also water-soluble stabilizer, but it's clear. And this actually kind of, here, it sounds almost like plastic. It's almost like a sheet of gelatin. So if my hands are really sweaty or wet, it would start getting kind of gooey. So it's tough to work with in the summertime, but it's fine. And it's actually, you can't tell, but one side is actually a little bit textured and one side is smooth. So that helps as well.
Where do you find it?
Joanne Fabrics. anyway, you can find it online. These are both made by Pelon. So this is just a little, it comes on the bolt. I buy it by the bolt because I go through so much of it. So you can see where, and then this is, so for something like this, what I will do, and I'll just go through the process right now, we'll just put this over here. So I just take my hoop, and I use my hoop just as a guideline so I know how much fabric to put down, so I don't put down a ton more. Unless I'm doing a large piece. If I'm doing a large composition, I have a large work table, I'll do the whole piece. I'll just take some quilting safety pins or straight pins and just kind of pin it and be very careful handling it. Usually I roll it up and then focus on one area at a time. I have much larger hoops. And I'll start hooping it and moving around section to section. But for something like this, you can see this is just, trying to make a mess. You can see it's just loose fibers. So to make this, all I did is, and this is the same, what's left of that mix. And this could be pieces that I've snipped. Sometimes I'll grab pieces of fabric and start snipping until the combination looks the way I want it to look. Rather than jars of paint, I have bags of fabric. And so it just gets snipped down. It doesn't have to be scrap fabric. Sometimes I'll just kind of let things happen naturally because if I'm sewing a garment, obviously the fabric's going to get making a quilt or something. The fabrics tend to be already somewhat curated, so I'll work with that. Other times it is really just very random. And I also look at fabric sometimes. A print like this, once it's torn up or shredded, looks very different. You don't see the pattern anymore, you just see the color and the tonality. And so it is an artistic way of looking at it, but just a different way. So sometimes I don't really know. I think, oh, this will be great. I start tearing it apart, ripping it. My husband thinks I'm crazy. Sometimes I'll sit here and accidentally just pull the threads off. So I will go to extremes here. So there's that I can add to the mix. So that really is how I make these mixes. This is just fabric scraps, but there's no reason I couldn't add or wouldn't add bits of fibers. Things like little bits of yarn, whatever I happen to have. This actually is. Let's see, I have a stash of these. These are pieces that actually were off another piece I did where just the edge, when you try to cut up fabric and sometimes the edge frays, I saved that. There we go. So that goes in there. So you'll kind of see how this will come together though, because it really is almost like making a salad. And I should actually move this down to my, so I put it on top of the white because that's in my background. And you can see, now I'm going to play with it. It's because if I'm thinking of the top, what I can see as the right side, then I will play with it until it I see the right combination of colors. I'm not actually looking for, a flower or something to appear, but I'm just looking for an interesting composition. And I may decide that, this was just given to me today. So I can just cut a piece of this and so you'll see I'll just pull it off. It takes a lot of fibers, so more than you think. So this one I might actually kind of keep it and add a piece on the side. So it looks more like something there. So now you can see the background of fabric, this little bit of blue that I added, bluish green that I added in, this brown, and we'll see what happens. So that's roughly the shape of my hoop. It'll fill the hoop and then some. So I can either decide to go smaller or use a larger hoop. And by the time I'm done here, there'll probably be a pile of threads on the floor. So I have my pile. You can see how high it is and how much there is here. Part of it because I'm using only the water soluble. This will be gone. It will be just this matted down. So I want to be sure that if I leave gaps, I can intentionally leave a gap. But that has to be intentional. I have to be aware that that's what I'm doing. Because it will be a hole when I'm done. So then I just place the second layer right on top. And I give it a press. Now I take the hoop, and because of the way I'm working, you can see how this side is flat and this side kind of goes in. That's how I work in my machine. So I want to make sure that this part is on the bottom. And just slide it under that area. And then put this piece on top. And I do kind of, sometimes if it's really large or really bulky, I'll actually take some tape and pull it so that it's a little taller, but I think I can just do it with my hands here. And just push it down. And right away, you can see it's already the beginnings of a composition. This would be, if you're painting, the underlayment, the first pass, film and watercolor class, you know what I'm always talking about, the first layer. Everything's in layers. So this is the first layer. And this is a chance for me to now look at it and say, oh, I left the hole, I didn't mean to, or I don't like that. I can take it apart, start over. But I don't worry about accents or highlights at this point. This is just sort of the base. So I'll go with this. So this is another one I just did earlier, just to show you. And then usually I just trim this off, just because it gets in the way, but there's no need to. So I'll actually work on this piece since I have it here. And I'm going to sew this in a minute, but I'll show you how I make other sandwiches, because there's also this, which is a different material. This is just thread. It's just a bunch of threads. Actually, there's a little bit of fabric here. This was actually, I dumped out the bowl next to my sewing machine. This is what's in there. You can see like things happen in a certain way. And what I used here, instead of the stabilizer, I used this tulle netting. And this is the same stuff used in tutus, bridal veils, and sometimes it's called illusion. I've also used organza, basically anything sheer, because this will more or less disappear once it's been stitched. This is what was used as a base for this. So, and also for the base of blue ball, just because it gives it a little more cohesiveness. Also the large pieces. Something small like this just takes a lot more thread. You can get the same effect, but it takes more thread. So for something like this, I have my tool here. Again, I just have a big piece that will get folded in half. So half will be the bottom, half will be the top. I have also used different pieces, one color on the bottom, another color on the top. So it depends on what I'm doing. And this is the rest of that thread that was on my, I actually had a spool of thread where I had accidentally sliced into a section of it, so I had to pull off a big clump of it. So that's what this is. It's mostly pink. And so, and you can see I'm leaving some of it actually in like these little hanks that can sort of, how I just yanked it off the spool. But there's a little bit of purple in here, so it kind of got mixed in. And just for interest, I'll take a little bit of this, I'll pull it apart into more fibers. And you can really see, I'm actually just really mixing it. So I want it to be, I don't want it to look like I laid blue on top of pink, but it's kind of in there. So it'll be peeking out a little bit. So again, I'm using this hoop, so I want to make sure it fits in the middle. I'll fold it over the top. Put my hoop on the bottom. And again, the tighter the whole thing is, the neater, the easier it'll be to stitch. It'll stitch cleaner, but sometimes I've had really good effects with just very messy, bumpy things as well. So again, a lot of this is trial and error. I have many pieces that a lot of times I'll even cannibalize pieces like this. If I start stitching it doesn't look right, I'll just start snipping it away and get thrown in another piece. So I try to kind of go with the zero waste philosophy. And so you can see this one now. Again, it looks interesting when you kind of smush it. It's almost, I kind of think of it like the slides. If you're making slices, sort of cells or anything organic. And I mean, really quickly, this is silly, I'm looking at this, and this is where I start playing games, like when you look at clouds and ask what you see. So on this side, it's very swirly and curly, kind of abstract. On this side, as soon as I turn it over, I don't know if you see it, I see a monkey face. Yes, like the smile, 2 eyes, little nose, kind of a hair bow or something, kind of messy hair. So you can have fun, you can get cartoony. So sometimes I'll play with that part of it and work on it. Other times I'll go back to the abstract and go with it. So this is something else I can stitch.
Do you ever name any of your pieces?
I tend to use abstract names like that. The large piece is mélange. Mélange, French for a mixture, because that was actually for a show that I did in conjunction with the restaurant in Worcester. And there was a group of us artists, they made a dish, and so each of us got one course that was our inspiration piece to create a piece of art based on. And I had a bowl that was noodles, and it was a lot of ingredients, and so that's sort of what kind of came to my mind. That piece there, the blue one, is called Dynamic, just because it's almost like a clockwork. It has motion to it in both the fibers and the copper. The sculptural piece is Cerulean Basin. I tend to use abstract titles because my purpose in my art is not to tell you what it is, because it is abstraction, but to elicit a particular emotion or feeling. And so Cerulean Basin, Cerulean Blue is a sky. It is a basin in shape, but other than that, I don't really want to spoon feed you what to think. It's just, it's how do you, what do you get out of the piece? So I do suggestions more than the pink circle on the square. That's actually one that's going to be going in Arts Worcester starting next week for their exhibit Feast, based on a Fitchburg Art Museum exhibit. And so the theme is feast or food. And they had 10 pieces that they showed the artists and asked us to sort of be inspired by one or more of the pieces. My inspiration, there's one black and white photograph of some children like at a carnival or something, and someone's holding out a big piece of cotton candy. And they're all sort of like, this is great. There's another piece that was just very simple, abstract, but it was a gradation of color from yellow on the outside to white in the middle. And it was entitled Lemon and Sea Salt. And so, kind of matching up those two inspirations, I call it eye candy. Just, it's kind of, when anyone who comes up closer can see that it's fluffy, it's got that texture. It pops from the black and white, mostly background, so it's a lot of inspirations out there. So I do name all my pieces. Occasionally I'll fall back on the untitled just because I'm kind of stumped, but that is definitely the hardest part for me. Let's see, so I have these pieces to stitch, and then I have one more here, and I'm going to grab. This actually I just pre-did. This is, what I did was on the white water soluble, I actually traced a drawing of mine that a sketch I did. And what I usually do with my sketches, and I just wrote this here, most times I have my sketchbook. These might be large sketches, small sketches, and I will take them and digitize them, because then I can do whatever I want with them. Sometimes I'll etch them on wood, I'll engrave them. I work in makerspace, so I have access to all sorts of tools, so it's kind of fun. So I drew this flower, just a simple pen and ink sketch. It took me about 2 minutes to sketch it out. But then I've gotten so much mileage out of this. I used it as a background for watercolor, blots and things. I sketched it on here. This was actually what this flower came from. You can see. And so, again, the same way I did that one, I just traced it onto the water soluble. And I added a second layer of the clear. And the reason for that is just to give it a little more body. You can always double up, triple up on layers just for stability, because once it's washed away, it's only thread. And also what I'm going to do, you'll see me, is I'll kind of push this on top of it because it adds a little more stiffness to it. It acts as a stiffener. And you can see this is actually one I did. I blew it up. It's the same sketch, so I'll be doing one that's more of a corner piece. So you can see how it's the same. Again, digital manipulation, I kind of incorporate a lot of that into my work as well, trying to get more mileage out of one drawing. And then that eye candy pink piece, this was the original sketch that I used for my thread painting. And if you look up closely, you'll see that I did stitch those swirls. They're just obscured a bit by the fluff. So this was just, and this is just a Sharpie, because once it washes away, it all dissolves away. And I use Sharpie rather than water-based pens because water-based pens will eat right through the stabilizer. So you get holes when you're trying to draw. I do a very light touch anyway, because anything liquid will start dissolving the stabilizer. So it's a really quick sketch. Sometimes I'll just use a very soft pencil. But if it's something that I might use light colors in, the graphite might actually get into the fibers, so I try to avoid the graphite. So I think I have enough samples. So I'll be stitching on a bunch of these. I probably won't finish anything completely, but you'll get a glimpse into the process of how these are done and how the stitching works. It is slow, but it does kind of build up quickly. So, oh, and one more piece I should show this quickly. Go to dark mode. This is just a simple watercolor background. You know, basically a 1 minute, just kind of a sunsetty, you know, blue in the upper sky, the sunset colors. Greenish background because it's going to be a forest scene. And what I do is I love using these plastic page protectors, and I just slip it in there and I sketch out what I'm going to stitch on top. And it's nice because you can reuse these, just some alcohol, and the Sharpie comes right off. So it's a nice way for me to audition and practice and see what I'm going to do. And so once I get what I like, then this is that cambric material I was telling you about, that, you know, the black polypropylene. And I'm going to use 2 layers, but what I did was I took this out, put this on my light table, and put this over it and used some chalk and just sketched it out and traced it out. Not to be an exact, what's going on, just to give you an idea of where to stitch. And I basically wanted sort of trees, and so you're looking at the sunset through trees. And so what I do, and I'm using 2 layers of this now, and I do that just so I have more coverage. And actually, because I don't want to have too much at the very top. So you'll see I'm focused, so I have, you know, 1 layer down, 2 layers down below, I'm sorry, 2, 3 layers down below, and then 1, 2, 3, 2 in the middle, and then just 1 layer on top as I'm stitching. So the trees at the top will have the least amount. This all goes on top of this, and will also get stitched. And then after that, I actually hit this with a heat gun, and most of this black will disappear. And it'll just stay behind where I'm stitching. So, and this happens to be a treescape, but I've done this with, and I do it on watercolor, but I'll also do it on top of just fabric collages. It can be on top of anything. I've done it on sort of pieces of magazines that are collaged onto paper. The only thing is the paper needs to be a little bit sturdy just so that the fabric doesn't, the stitching doesn't cut through. So a lot of different ways of creating the background that you're going to be stitching. Now I'll start with this one just because it's here. I realize I did not thread my machine, so I'll have to do that quickly. The thread I use, and I'll show you some of these. I use a combination of sewing threads. I have them on bobbins, I have them on spools, basic sewing threads. I also will use thinner yarns if I can get it onto my machine. I'm just going to pull up my little kit here. It depends on what I'm doing, what I'm trying to get done. I can use also cones. As you mentioned, it takes a lot of thread, so cones of thread is good. But serger thread tends to be thinner, so it takes more time because you have to do multiple passes to get the same effect. I also use variegated embroidery threads, so that the thread itself does the work for you by changing color, so I don't have to change it often. So basically, I'm just a magpie. If I see threads or fibers, I'll use it. I am careful if the thread is old, like if I get it at an estate sale. If it's a really cool looking thread, I'll still purchase it, but I'll be aware that it might be more fragile and not as stable, so I might pair it with something new just to make sure it stays together. Because last thing I want to do is have this whole thing fall apart after all that work. Bobbin. And for this, I'll use a these are dark brown. I think it might show up there on this. Dark brown and the black will look almost black anyway. And there are times when I'll put 2 or 3 spools of thread on my machine and sew them all at the same time. So I put 1 or 2 here. That's why I use the bobbins. because I can put more threads on the machine at once, and just use a larger eye needle and go through the needle. And the needle I have here, you'll notice there's no presser foot. It's a special needle, it's a darning foot, so what happens is as I sew, the needle, the whole bulk of this goes down, it presses on the fabric, but then it goes back up together with it, so that I'm free to move my fabric around as I'm sewing. Nice outline needle, but it does not work on this machine. Bear with me a second. Try this needle. This probably part of the whole process.
That's the way I do it.
Well, I have a nice automatic one, but it doesn't work with this particular needle. It's not the right size. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask now, or I can take questions later.
How much time during the day do you do this?
I do it in fits and starts. Sometimes I'll be doing this for, I don't know, 8 hours straight sometimes. I'm a night owl, so I stay up all night doing this sometimes. Unfortunately, I live in the house, so my studio is not above my bedroom or near my bedroom, so my husband is asleep. So, keeps us together, I guess. But, I mean, I've also had situations where I've left things on the machine and just done 15 minutes of it. And then literally left it right here in place, even left the machine on so I don't mess up the settings, and gone away and come back later, and done another 10 minutes, and another 15 minutes.
Does your machine ever, do you have it so you can leave it going?
No, I can't have it so automatic, because I'm controlling everything manually. So you'll see when I do this. And the other thing you'll notice down here, these things, the feed dogs, on a regular sewing machine, they're usually up.
What machine is this?
It's just a regular sewing machine, it's a Bernina brand. But it's a regular straight sewing machine, it has straight zigzag, it has a few some fancy stitches, but any regular machine, I just put it on simple straight stitch. You don't have to change anything because I'm manually controlling everything. These little feed dogs, typically you would have a presser foot here and it would automatically kind of feed the fabric through. On this one, I actually have a button that makes them drop down so that they are no longer engaged. So now I can sew in any direction at any speed. As long as I'm not moving while the needle is in the fabric itself, I'm fine. This is going to get noisy. Let's see how this. So I will do a little. And I typically just tap it down first. I do a few slow stitches just to. And I apologize, but I can't sew without being barefoot. So you see how that comes down? That white piece actually like touches the fabric when I stitch. So now I won't worry about these. I'll just trim those out later. I usually just pull it down and sew over. And now you can see it goes. And I'm just going to play with the trunk. So I'm just going to stitch down the trunk a little bit. Mostly I'll just move around just to kind of get this piece tacked down so I don't have to hold it so much. This trunk is a little bit wider. I'm just going to grab my sketch of the tree so you can kind of get an idea of what I'm stitching. So that is visible. That gives you an idea of sort of what I'm trying to do. That's the sketch I'm following. I might be rubbing off my fingers, so I might end up losing some of it, but we'll see. So, and then you can see when I get to the bottom here of this area, that's going to be more like I'm thinking shrubbery. See how I can go any direction I want. This is by dropping the feed dogs and doing doing that free motion. So the first thing I need to do is just make sure everything is tacked down appropriately. And this gets tedious after a while. I've been known to write things, just randomly scribble things in, so if you ever pick up a piece of mine that has a BBC award in it, you probably do. I try to stitch at least twice on every line so that this cambric is secured somewhat. And this process actually goes fairly quickly. It may not seem like it, but it is. Because I don't need to fill in everything. I usually don't go to the very edge of the paper. I can feel it here, so I'm just going to. And this piece probably won't be as complete as some of the others might do. I apologize for my hand here. I'm trying to keep it out of the camera. And so this is just sort of what you would see in the winter driving through. When you see the skeletal trees. And so you can start to see what's being stitched there. And I'll go back down to the ground, jumping from tree to tree. Sometimes I'll use the overlapping branches. So this is basically me painting right now. The drawing. The needle is my pen nib, and if you wonder, yes, I have some to my fingers. And this is actually where I would probably wear those gloves, because they really made it work. Some needle will go through the tip of your finger, right? I'm not too concerned about getting the line super clean, because you'll see in the next step of this process, when I melt the polypropylene. Comes in just knowing how things will turn out before you do it. Excuse me, I'll just be looking around for a bit. So you can see that this piece right now, I think in the light, you can see those lines where the stitching was. If you look at the back, you can really see. That's just my that's what it looks like. So it is kind of tree-like. It is similar to what I intended here. That should be close to that. so normally I would take a little more care with this, but for now, just demonstrating, this is pretty much it. Now, if I wanted to, I might trim away with scissors the top a little bit, depending on how thin I wanted the top to be. Any place where there's not a lot of stitching. But I think I'm going to just do a few snips here and let it be. And I'm going to grab my heat gun. Shouldn't have worn platform heels. So now you'll see what happens when I start. This is just a standard craft heat gun. And it does get hot if I drop it, that's probably why. You'll see when I start hitting it, see it's starting to shrink away. And the center area where there's more stitching, see how it's not melting as quickly, but the edges are just pretty much shriveling up right away. So now I kind of sit here and I think about where I want it to be. Peeking through the trees. And I can leave some of that wispy stuff up on top to be sort of like the leftover leaves. Takes a little longer in the center here. So I can take it down to almost just where the stitching is, or I can leave it more foliage-like. And I actually found a white version of this fabric, so I've been playing with painting it, and then so it really does look like sort of trees left over. So you can see what's starting to happen here. So where typically if you're doing a watercolor, you might take a pen or dark paint and go back over the details. I'm doing that actually, instead of that, I'm doing stitching. See how that just pulled right up? So trying to get between the trunks of the trees. And you can get that as clean as you want it or as messy. And here I stitched around more so it looks more like ground cover. But I can hold it in one spot and still see some of those holes, gaps appearing. Just don't hold it so long that the paper starts burning. Ask me how I know. And you can keep going, and if it turns out, and I've done this myself, where you burn away too much, you can always go back in and see this piece right here wasn't stitched at all, so it just completely pulls away. So if you know you have big blank areas, you can also trim those before you start burning. So you can clean that up if you want, or you can leave it more messy. So this is a very quick pass at it. You can kind of get an idea of what happens as you stitch and burn. So this is a process that I've done. So I like to do with the skeletal trees because it does show up well, especially when you do the painted backgrounds. But I've also done it with more abstract subject matter of the scenes. Just trying to get right here. Really like the sun, you can see right here, it really, with the stitching, you just see a little bit of that black left behind. So you can get, and depending on how heavily you stitch it ahead of time, you can really get some cool effects. And so take a little more time and plan out what you're doing and stitch a little more intentionally. You do get some really nice scenes from. So that's the first thread painting, using the polypropylene, using the properties of that material to melt it. The next one, and I will still try to keep the palettes the same. So. And what I do when I paint through these flowers, I do the outlines first, just so I don't lose the shape of it. And then I'm going to go back over and scribble over it and put it into the flower coloring. And then go back and then do the outlines again to really seal it and make those outlines prominent. Now, my plan for that piece, that was the first one I did. I have a few others in progress at home. I have dozens of these hoops. And I like to do them sort of backspin, so when I'm working on one color thread, I'll keep changing my thread. I'll roll the big parts first on multiple pieces and go back. I'm hoping to maybe just do a whole sculptural piece where because they're dimensional, and then have them on sort of a branch piece that will also be made out of fabric. So, with the metal armature. So we'll see how that works out. It's evolving. So, so this piece here just goes under my needle. And now this, to start off with, is a little more delicate just because it is only this stabilizer. You can see it's a little bit wrinkled. I'm just trying to pull it a little bit to give it some tautness. And then, again. And my machine actually has a setting where it'll stop with the needle down. So on this one I actually use that setting. And on this one I will cut away that thread just because I don't want to get in the way. And then you can see basically it's just tracing. So I'll do a little bit of a circular motion to the front just to tap the thread down. And then I just follow up a line. And very roughly sketch trace each of those petals. And I realize a lot of times in the process I'll end up messing up the shape, but that's all right. It's more about how can I do a continuous line. Anyone who's a quilter kind of knows how to get those quilting lines to keep connecting. This is why my trace of my original drawing is pretty basic, just to block out the basic shapes and locations of my petals. And so you can see how in the beginning it tends to go slower, especially when I'm trying to draw a distinct shape. It tends to go a bit slower at first. I'm also trying to be careful that I don't have too many sharp corners because those can tend to tear the stabilizer. Now right now, at this point, if I try to dissolve this piece, I would end up with just a line of thread and nothing else really. Because they're not interlocked enough. So I have, and you can see when I stitch, I go back down, I go over that line of stitching a little bit, just to make sure those lines of stitching interlock. So this takes a lot of time, and you notice how I spin the wheel around a lot too, because it's easier to see certain areas and go in certain directions. Just like, I know I tell watercolor students, when you paint, your hand wants to paint an arc a certain way. So when you try to paint the reverse arc, it's usually more difficult, so why fight it if you can't, if you don't have to, turn it upside down, or move around. And so that's what I kind of do here as well. So now you can see I've got a basic flower shape there. And then I can add a little more detail. Partly for my own sanity, I will move around and work on multiple parts, just because doing the same thing at once is very difficult. But you see, this is the beauty of the free motion where I can move it in any direction and at any speed. Once I get going, I can get pretty fast. And this machine I have actually has one feature I like, which is that I can actually throttle the speed. So even if I floor the petal, it will only stitch at half speed, which is kind of nice because sometimes I tend to get carried away and I'll start pushing down and it'll be going too fast and I'll end up stitching where I don't want to, and I need to keep going at a slower pace. But you can see how what I like about this process is that the beauty of that irregularity of stitching, where it's not perfect. You're not drawing really smooth, clean lines. You're not, it's not a machine that, machine embroidery is nice, but it gives you perfect results every time. And you don't want perfection in art. You want that natural imperfection, a little bit of chaos in there. And some spaces, I'm trying to go over the same line twice, but I'll end up missing, and so it'll be a little bit sketchy. That's fine. Again, that's the beauty of art. Just like when you make a mistake in stroke, watercoloring, incorporate that into your design. You don't try to fix it or go too far, it would be perfect. Because then you might as well just do a digital. So this, again, this seems like a slow, tedious, and it is a bit slow and tedious, but the results, I think, are different from what we would ever get. So I don't do a lot of the detail work that you saw in the flower at this point, because this is just laying down the background. And you'll see in a moment, once I change the thread color, what I mean by that. So I'm going to speed up for a minute just to get some more thread down, because I need to have a certain amount of thread. Remember, someone was asking about what type of machine this is. We can do this with a very basic machine as long as you're able to drop your feed jobs, because you're controlling everything manually. Even the length of the stitches, where the machine's going, all of that is just my fingers here moving this hoop. It does take some practice just to get that level of control. But other than that, I do believe anybody can do this. It is a lot of practice. Sometimes it helps to have an extra cup of coffee, sometimes it hurts. So it depends on what you're going to get done. So you can see how that piece is done. Now what I'm going to do is change my upper thread to a lighter color. So I'm going to leave the bobbin. Normally I would change the bobbin thread as well, but just for tonight, I'm going to leave the bobbin black. And then just pick something like a pink for the top, so that it's visible. I'll have to take a minute to try to thread that needle in. The next stage on this, I can hold this up. You can see how that's been stitched in. And you can see that the thread is, you can pass it on quickly while I do it. So you can see the partial where it's, partially stitched, but it gives you the outline, and you can see how I've tried to go over the same lines multiple times to give it some structure. This next step that I'm doing with the pink now will kind of bring the whole piece together, so it will have some solidity to it, and it won't be a loose mess once it's dissolved. And yes, the table does shake a lot when I do this, which is why I have the camera on a different stand so that it won't be background all over.
We need to press.
Oh, she's ready.
So,
Ken, she wants it.
So I'll pass another piece around next time, but it's just basically, it's all stitched, so if you felt it, you would feel the tension on it. That's fine.
I thought you wanted to do this side.
If there's anyone who really wants to see it over there, I can pass it real quick. And you can see I'm slipping all these threads, I'm just going to throw them onto my table. Normally I have my little bowl, so this will be the beginning of the next piece, all in black. So now I put the pink on top. Like I said, I would have a lighter colored bobbin thread typically, but I'm just using the pink for now. And now this is the fun part, where I want to keep it black, but in the center I won't bother with any pink. But everywhere else, I'm going to, and I just take the first few careful strokes, just to tap down the, and I lie a little bit. I'll put a little bit of pink in the center just to give some continuity. But again, if I get too much pink in a spot, I'm going over this again later with black, so I can always redarken those areas. But now, this is all about laying down a lot of color. And I'm only doing this in one color tonight, but typically I would have I'll go purple to yellow, blue to, whatever color I feel like. I'm not tied to any realistic color scheme, so I might have a green flower, whatever I feel like doing. This is in black, mostly because I felt like it was highly visible, but I'll also have some flowers that may be black and gray, shades of black and gray with a white outline on them. So it's just a matter of, and again, you'll see, I kind of go outside, I color outside the line a little bit, and that's on purpose because that actually locks in the pink with the black outlining. So I will slow down a little bit when I'm doing like that, so I don't go too far out. But then when I go in the center, it's just, I'll floor it. Which kind of is how I draw it, so it's slow. So you can see it's really quick. And the larger pieces actually are easier in a way because the motions are bigger. And you'll see that when I move on to other pieces. When I get into speed sewing mode, everything does change, so it's what it seems. I learned the hard way. One time I was trying to record something, I had my phone propped right here, and it completely failed. I think I have the bare minimum right now of stitching. So let's see how this works when I resolve it. See that there's a lot of pink there now, and so now I'm just going to go back a little bit with the black and stitch it again. Actually, I'm going to skip that stage just because it's in the interest of time. I'll just go over the pink where the black should have been, and I'll just do the outline a little bit. So normally I'll just go back over the outline I did like this. Maybe I'll try to do something with it organic. And the beauty of this process is if I ever did something like that where there's a jam, I just can snip it and keep going. And anything that's a mess on the back can always just kind of be incorporated back into the whole piece. There we go. So I think I can show you the result at this point. So you can see it's stitched, and on the back side you can see more of the black. So it's whether one side is the right or wrong side is kind of, a judgment call. It's up to you what you think. So now, once this was completely stitched, and there would probably be at least twice as much thread on this. So I grab my scissors. And I'll trim away a good amount of this, because this is way too much water soluble. And what we can actually do with this is, I will actually store it in a jar and dissolve some water. And I can use this and I can paint it onto other fiber pieces if I can stick with them. Or you can actually wet the pieces and just kind of stick them together and make a larger piece. So there's not a lot of waste. So you have this piece now. And I'm just going to spill this water. Towels. So normally I would use regular towels, but paper towels are fine. And so you see the piece here now. It looks like it's on tissue paper or something. And I just dip it in the water. And just give it a little bit of a rub. The clear stuff dissolves away very quickly. The white will dissolve soon. It takes a little longer. The white actually takes a little bit of rubbing.
So the white's on the bottom.
Yes. Yeah. The clear stuff is very hard to draw on. It doesn't really take. So if I ever have to sketch something, I'll use the white to draw on. So there we go. You can see it's already. And I'm just kind of like rubbing the edges of it. And I'm not really, if I really wanted all of it gone, I would put some running water and really rinse it out. But I'm letting it kind of sit in it. And then it's just a matter of pressing it dry.
Have you ever tried that, like with a permanent marker?
I use Sharpie on the, it still doesn't work as well. I think just because it's so plasticky.
Okay.
Yeah. I use Sharpie no matter what, just because it is an alcohol-based ink versus water-based, so it doesn't dissolve as much.
Okay.
So this is what it comes out like once it's, so. And you can actually deform it a bit, so you have to kind of be careful with it at this point. But you can sculpt it and shape it. And then you can actually, this is where I would put it in a little container or cup and make it flower shaped. If you left it like that to dry, it will dry in that shape. So I'll leave this here. This will still be damp at the end. So, and then I'll do one more demonstration of how I put the other fibers together, because, and I'll put this one since it has pink in it. So again, the same process. It's just a matter of, now I'm not dissolving away the netting on something like this, so that when I stitch it, it's going to stay together much better. And so you can kind of see how it's starting to mat things down a bit. And what I typically do for a piece like this is I'll use a neutral color that kind of blends in with either the netting or the fibers, so that this first pass of stitching will just disappear. You'll see again the darker pink. And this is where I can actually start either going in a particular pattern, or I can start working on certain areas that I see. I've done things where I've actually made bubbles, or just done circles all around. And I don't have to worry so much about how dense my stitching is, or whether the stitching even touches other areas of stitching, because there is that netting layer and it'll hold it all together. Back to the stitching, so that you see these pieces in this case. So you would see things like these wisps free and loose. So if I wanted to have pieces like that, then you do that. Or you can go back and stitch them down more carefully and attach them. The netting also will react to the heat gun. So that's another thing to play with. So for example, it shrinks right back down to the stitching line and almost disappears. And I'll leave these out so you can take a look at these after. Melts away. So there's a lot of different effects you can have once you're done to finish these. And then when it's done, I take usually either of those pieces, canvases, this is canvas panel. I can paint, attach fabric to it, do whatever I feel like, and then the piece is mounted on whichever side I decide is the right side. And it's and sometimes there's multiple layers, other times it's, I'll decide, I only like this part of it. So I fold it, however you feel like going. And this is where the artistic eye comes in and you create a composition the way you want. And there's been times I've actually folded the tool in and actually made this part of the piece. You can fold that in, or you can cut it away. You decide whether it's waste or not. And then this is where then I may take other threads or the metal accents and keep adding more detail, more definition, until the final piece is what I sort of imagined it to be. So I think that took quite a bit of time, but I hope that was interesting. Any specific questions you can come and ask after, that's fine.
You ever have anything catch on fire?
Yes, I have. Because I work with found materials a lot of times, sometimes I don't know what the content of something is. And I'll either be hitting a heat gun. I do actually have a butane torch. Sometimes I'll zap it with the flame. And things will kind of start smoking. But I'm not sure, I'll do it either outside or somewhere where there's a fire extinguisher over sink to make sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I see a student all the time. Bill Davis.
Bill, yeah. He's my buddy. I think
We have Dolmans together. We eat together
Okay.
on Wednesdays.
I think we gab as much as we paint, but that's